the Start menu and you go to Computer, one of your drives there will be labeled as P. Okay, I'll call it Save P is what it's called. This is my laptop. I don't have a P drive, so just pretend that this D drive that I'm clicking on is my P drive. Okay, so you're going to go into your P drive, and we want to set up our folder structure in a way that makes sense. So what we want to do is we're going to make a folder. So make a new folder. There's a button up here. It's very easy to do. And it says New Folder. And you're going to make a new folder called your last name. So for me, it'd be Sarcona _ F 2015. Okay? And then you'll go into that folder. And inside that folder, you're going to make another folder called 2510. And you're going to open up Maya 2016. You can just type in Maya, and it'll most likely find 2016 there. If Maya opens, it may ask you, you don't have any preferences. Do you want to create default preferences or copy the old ones? It shouldn't ask you because no one else has opened Maya on these, so we should be good. So if it did, you would just say create default if that was the case. All right. So this is opening up Maya. As it opens up Maya, it creates preferences. If our preferences were deleted before, it would create brand new preferences for us to use. All right, so the first thing that we're going to see when we do this is a fun little feature that they show you. Here's all the new stuff since the last version, so you can see exactly what's new in the software. For you guys, everything is new, so this has no relevance at all. So you can just say, show this at startup and just uncheck that. You don't need that. That'll pop up every time you boot the software unless you click that specific thing. Okay? Now you may also get another screen, and it didn't come up, so someone may have turned it off. But there's another one. Tutorial. No. Well, anyway, it would pop up and it would say, you know, here's some tutorial videos you can watch if you want to watch those videos. Okay, so it didn't pop up for me, but no big deal. Again, we could watch them, we can close them, whatever. So this is the Maya interface. It's very, very confusing if you've never been in a 3D environment before, because not only are we working, you know, X and Y, up and down, left and right, but we're also working with depth, okay, which is obviously a lot different if you've never done it before. So we're looking at our Maya hotkeys here. The biggest ones right now we're going to focus on is navigation. So up in that navigation area, you'll see that there's three. There's tumble, there's orbit, there's track, and there's dolly. So those are the three basic movements that by 2 or 3 weeks into the class you should have down, okay? And if you look at them, you'll see that they're very similar to what they are. Alt left mouse button, Alt middle mouse button, and Alt right mouse button. Keep your hand on the left side of your keyboard if you're right-handed. If you're left-handed, you can swap that, obviously. But keep your left hand on the right side of the keyboard, and you just hold Alt and you left mouse button inside of this view, and you could orbit around or tumble around. Or you can Alt middle mouse button and move it around, or Alt right mouse button and zoom in and out. Okay, so take a couple seconds and do those three things. Okay, so you'll also see the next two that were in here. Go to last view and go to next view. Those are the little brackets. So right next to the P on your keyboard, you could just cycle between those, and what it does is it just jumps you back to a different view. Okay? Because we're working in basically an unlimited realm, sometimes you will get lost. Okay? And there's no breadcrumbs to get back to it. That's where we would use go to last view or go to next view to kind of get back to where we were. Just as an example, watch my screen. See the grids right there. I know that's my home, but sometimes we accidentally go way off into nowhere and we can't find our way home. We have no idea where this is. so we can use those left brackets to get us closer to back to where we were at. Okay. Now we could also use the F, which is frame selected, and A, which is frame all. We don't have anything selected, so there's not really anything it'll do except for just kind of frame the grid. So there's not really anything for that specific tool at the moment. Okay. So let's take a little tour of Maya while we're in this. So up at the top here, this is just your standard menu bar. And I'm sure you've seen this before in other programs, File, Edit, and so on. And typically the help file is right at the end. Okay. On a Mac, you might have different menus up at the top, named different things as far as the help, and I think there's like an apple on the left or whatever. But typically that's going to be the workflow. Okay. Now if you look, this one says File, Edit, Create, Select, Modify, Display, Windows. Pay attention to those. Okay. And then the rest are Mesh, Edit Mesh, Mesh Tools, Mesh Display, Curve Surfaces, Deform, blah, 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 blah. All right. Over here it says Modeling. Click on that and choose one of the other ones except for Customize from the list. Okay. So I chose Rigging, and if you look, my menu bar has now changed. Okay. So it no longer says anything about Mesh. Now it says Skeleton, Skin, Deform, Constrain, Control, and Cache. If I choose Animation, there's different ones. If I choose FX, there's different ones. Okay. So every time we go to one of those new menus, it's going to show us a different menu strip going across the top. That can be very confusing. If I say go to the Mesh tool or go to the Mesh menu, you can't find the Mesh menu anywhere. It's not up here. You have to switch it to Modeling, then you can get to the Mesh menu. Okay? So just be aware that if you don't see a menu item, you're probably not in the right menu area. Okay? Now here's the awesome part of it, is you don't even need to use that menu bar on top. All right? Move your mouse to the middle-ish of the screen and hold down the space bar. Don't tap the space bar, hold down the space bar. And what you're going to see is this thing, oops, this thing right here called the Hotbox. Okay? Now if it didn't come up, you may have to click inside your view and then hold the space bar, and then it'll come up. Now the Hotbox is every single menu. Okay? Every single one of those top menus, that's what the Hotbox is. So it's very easy to get used to using this as opposed to switching this one here, switching this here, switching this here to try to get to the menus that you're after. If you get used to using this, all those menus are right here, right there, right there, right there, and right there. Okay? Now, people in industry, people that do this stuff on a daily basis, will work like this. Okay? And even when display, somehow I can hide that. I forget. Oh, whatever. It's over here. Show common menus. Main menus. All right. So people in industry will actually work like this, where they have no menu showing, and they'll rely strictly on using the Hotbox for all of those menu items. Okay, so let me turn my stuff back on because I don't want to leave it like that while we're demonstrating this. Oops. There we go. Okay, so we can switch between menus. Using the Hotbox is definitely the easiest way to go if you're not sure of where it is. And trust me that this whole thing here gets a lot easier the more you use it. Okay, it's going to take some time. I don't want you to get frustrated and say, you know, I can never find anything in here. After doing this every day for a couple weeks, you'll know exactly where those menu buttons are, and it'll just become second nature to find them. Okay. So this is, like I said, your regular menu bar. This is where we obviously switch those menus from. One of the cool ones is Customize. You can see there's a Customize down there. You can customize every single thing pretty much inside Maya. Okay? So if I realized I use this menu item and this menu item and these 4 and then this 2 and then that 1, I can make my own menus. I can make my own buttons. I can make my own everything for those specific tools. Okay? So it's very cool that you can do that because some programs like Photoshop and Illustrator and After Effects pretty much do not let you do that kind of stuff, okay? If you've ever been in Photoshop or Illustrator and you're constantly jumping to the same tool over and over and over again, it just becomes too boring, all right? So that's what that is. These next couple are New Scene, Open Scene, and Save Scene. These should be pretty common from different programs. Typically, lots of programs have these same 3 buttons, okay? Then we have these, which are actually new. Come on. This has got to be undo, yep, and then redo. I never use those, just use the hotkeys on the keyboard, okay? You'll see these little lines. There's like a line and then this little thicker line in the middle, okay? Or it's a line with a little arrow. That means it's collapsible or expandable, okay? So if I click on these, you can see how I can expand these out. Or if I click on the ones with the double lines, I can compress those in. So again, one of those areas that you may have issue with finding something that I'm clicking on is if your stuff is all compressed or your stuff is all expanded and mine's not, okay? So just be aware of that we want to use those when we can. Now the reason for this is because you see I've expanded everything and now stuff is cut off on my screen, okay? My laptop is actually lower resolution than I typically work, so stuff's getting cut off. Your screen may not have that problem, okay? So there's those. This thing says objects. We'll get to that. We'll get to this. We'll get to this stuff, okay? These are just other options that we would be playing with at some point. This is the next cool thing down here. See how it says curves and surfaces, and then it says polygon, and then sculpting and all of these. These are called shelves. This is basically, hey, I'm constantly going to that tool. I'm just going to drop it into my shelf and make a little icon for it there, okay? So it's a great way to say I'm always using these 5 buttons. Let me put those 5 buttons really accessible so I don't have to dig through a bunch of menus to find them. Look at this. If I go to here and here and here and this, see how many menu buttons I had to click just to get that? I can put this light-centric item right on my shelf. So then it's just a click away. So I literally just click a button and there it is, okay? So we're going to make our own shelves. So I want you to go to this little sprockety thing on the left and click on it and go to New Shelf and label it with your name, okay? So I'm going to put mine Sarcona_2510. And what we should see is that we have now a blank shelf with our name _2510, okay? This is a good indicator because it allows us to see, have our preferences loaded? There's my name, so it must have loaded. If we don't see our name, our preferences didn't load. Every time we come in, we want to load our own preferences so that someone else isn't screwing with our stuff, okay? So we're going to add a couple things to this shelf. So to add stuff to your shelf, on your list here, somewhere, did I put it? It's Control-Shift. You don't need to worry about it. You can write it down if you want. So we're going to hold down the Control key and the Shift key, okay? Now watch how I do it on mine before we do anything, okay? So I'm going to hold down Control and Shift, and I'm going to go up to the menu item. Okay, now I'm going to click on this history button and you'll see what happened. Nothing. No, it did happen. We just couldn't see it. Okay, so I'm going to click off of this and you'll see now I have a history button on there. I'll show you what people do because they're expecting something else to happen. Is that they say, hey, it didn't work. Hey, it didn't work. Oh, there it is. And then you end up with all these history buttons inside here. Okay. They're easy to get rid of. You just right-click and delete them. So you're going to hold Control-Shift, and then you're going to go down to Edit, Delete by Type, History. Okay, so hold Control and Shift and go to Edit, Delete by Type, History. Bam, you will have a Delete History button inside of your shelf. Now, that means nothing to you at the moment, but it will when we get to it. Delete history is one of those things that you will use not only like once a day, you'll probably use it like once every 10 minutes or 20 minutes or hour or so, okay? It's one of those buttons you're constantly clicking on, especially when stuff doesn't work right. Usually that's what we go to. All right, so then I'm going to hold down Control Shift, and I'm going to go to Modify Center Pivot. Okay, so Control Shift, Modify Center Pivot. We're also going to go to Window Outliner. So still hold Control Shift and go to Window Outliner. While we're there, we'll click on Attribute Editor, which is right above it. Modify Center Pivot. Okay, and then Window Outliner, and then Window Attribute Editor. And again, we're just kind of setting this stuff up now so that when we get to it, it's already there, it's already accessible. It makes it much easier if we have this stuff kind of set up and ready to go. Still holding Control Shift, go to Animation Editor and go to Graph Editor. Okay, under Window, Animation Editor, Graph Editor. And then under Rendering Editors, we can go to the Render View. Okay. Now, don't be afraid at any point while you're working, if you realize I'm constantly going here or there or anywhere, to use that and add to it. I'm showing you how to add stuff to your shelf so you'll use it. Okay. People who work in industry have a very difficult time coming into a blank slate of Maya, a default setup, because they're so used to all their customized hotkeys and preferences and all this other stuff we'll get to. Okay? So just to show them again, we hold down Control Shift, we went to Edit, Delete by Type History, we went to Modify Center Pivot, we went to Window Outliner, we went to Window Attribute Editor, we went to Animation Editor's Graph Editor, and we went to Rendering Editor's Render View. Okay? So again, anytime we're approached with that, I'm constantly going here, add it to your shelf. Okay? It just makes your life a lot easier. All right. So now that we've created our own shelf, it's awesome. We'll get into what these actually mean. The next part of this is this area down here. And we've already kind of seen that this is our work area. Okay? This is where most of the magic is going to happen, is inside that work area. You'll see that we have a grid laying on this area in the middle of our world, and then there's a darker X kind of going through it. That dark X, where it intersects, is our 0, 0, 0 position. Okay, that's the center of our world. So anything we create, typically it gets created right there at the center. Okay. We have a bunch of buttons up here that eventually we'll get into. On the left here, we have a bunch of different ways that we can move and scale and rotate our objects. We have some different layouts on this side. We have our timeline on the bottom. Over here, we have a channel box. And this is where a lot of stuff happens too, is the channel box. We don't see anything in there at the moment, so let's see something in there. Let's make something so we can see it. So let's go to Create, Polygon Primitives, and just click on any one of those objects inside there. I like the helix, so I'm going to click the helix. Okay. Once I've created an object, and like I said, it doesn't matter which one, you'll see in the channel box the items get populated. Now the other one that you could have over there is the attribute editor. Okay. Look at the two different things. This one is attribute editor because at the top it says attribute editor. And then the other one is the channel box. Okay. Oops. Channel box. Nope. There it is. Okay. This is cut off on my screen. Let me just scoot it over a nudge. There we go. Okay. So these buttons on top of your screen, the very top corner right there, will control what windows are being displayed. So the far right one is the channel box. Okay. So I can turn that on and off. Then this one is your tool settings. So you see how tool settings pops on and pops off. And then this one is attribute editor. That'll pop on and off. And then this one is your modeling toolkit, which will pop on and pop off. Okay? So I like to have the channel box always be on the right side of my screen. Okay? So there's reasons for it, but basically we just keep it on the right side of the screen. The attribute editor that pops up here, if we look at this and we switch between the channel box and the attribute editor, do you see how our grid area is getting smaller and bigger depending on which one I click on? Okay? What happens there is, think of like a video game. Think about that example about the bowling pin. Every time we do something, it has to calculate what we're doing. Okay? So every time I click attribute editor or channel box or attribute editor or channel box, it has to refresh and reload the stuff that's inside this viewport. An example of that, I opened up this angry bird inside of Maya. He was built inside of ZBrush, but I opened him up inside of Maya, and Maya would not let me do anything very quickly. I would zoom in, and then I would wait 5 minutes, and then it would update. I would zoom out, I would wait 5 minutes, and then it would update. Okay? So all of this, even though it's minuscule now, we don't really see a difference, you will see a difference as we get into bigger scenes. Okay? So I want you to make sure your attribute editor is on, so you'll see the little button on top. And then I want you to tear off the attribute editor. See the little dotted line? You click and you drag and it tears it off. Okay? So drag your attribute editor off and just set it somewhere else. We have two screens, I like to have the attribute editor and that stuff over on this screen and then my other stuff on that screen. Okay? A word of warning, if you have screens at home, some of you may have 2 screens or 3 screens. Maya remembers where all these things are positioned. So an example, one of my students had this attribute editor, whatever it was, on this screen on the left. When he comes to school, his extra screen is on the right. So Maya remembered, hey, that window is over here in Nowhere's Land and he couldn't get to it. So we had to figure out a way to get it back onto the screen. It wasn't a big deal, but obviously it's going to surprise you when you can't get to that window that's popping up way over on the left screen. Okay? So just be aware of that. That's why it's happening. But you'll see, I pulled off the attribute editor. It's as easy as that for everything. If I want to pull off any of these menus, I can pull those off. I could even go to this and pull this off. So now I have a menu for that specific item that we wanted, right? But again, those can get just too many menus. All right, you can close the attribute editor now. We don't need it open at the moment. Okay? So this is our channel box, and the channel box is going to list the top 10 list of things that we would do to this object. Okay? So if you look on the right, it says translate X, translate Y, translate Z, and then rotate X, Y, and Z, and then scale X, Y, and Z, and then visibility. So if we wanted to, we could translate this, let's say 10 units, up, and it would move 10 units up. Okay? If we wanted to scale it, we could scale it. If we wanted to rotate it, we could rotate it. Okay? All right, so we could just type these things in, but it's kind of like, you know, we're in 3D, there's got to be an easier way. So that's what these menu buttons are for on the left. Now again, we don't want to actually click on those menu buttons. We want to use our hotkeys. So if we wanted to move something, what is our hotkey for move? W. So we hit W. You'll see we have 6 icons that popped up. We have this red, green, blue arrow, and then we also have a red, blue, and green box. Okay? These things correspond to certain items. If you look at red, green, and blue, do those 3 colors mean anything to you? X, Y, and Z, right? But it's also like RGB, like the color scale, right? So that's the order it's always going to be, and it's never going to be blue, green, and red. It's always going to be red, green, blue, just like our color space, okay? So red is always going to be X, green is always going to be Y, and blue is always going to be Z. So RGB, X, Y, Z, okay? So if I move the red arrow, you can see that my translate X in my channel box moves. So move your stuff around a little bit. If you grab the blue arrow, it moves that around. If you grab the green arrow, it moves that around. What happens to the arrow that we just selected? It's yellow, right? That means it's active. So Maya's highlighting that, saying that that specific tool, that specific direction is active. And what that means is that we no longer have to physically select the arrow. Okay? So let's say I wanted to move this down. Okay? So I can click on the arrow and it highlights the Y direction up and down in yellow. Now I can go off of that. I don't have to get that close to it because sometimes there's like so many objects it's hard to select that exact one. So I can go off of that and use my middle mouse and it'll still move it. Okay? Now that, again, it's one of those things where it seems silly now, like who cares, I'll just click on it and move it, but you'll find so many times that you really want to use this tool to get your stuff where it needs to be. Okay? Now the other ones that you're going to see are these little boxes. Okay? These little squares that are red and green and blue, those little squares allow you to move something in one plane. Okay? So the arrows, I'm moving it just in this direction, or just in this direction, or just in that direction. Sometimes I want to move something in a plane. I want to move it in two directions at once. So that's what those allow me to do. Here's an example of that. I have this thing, and right now it's sitting on the floor, pretty much. I want to move it so it stays sitting on the floor. If I grab this box and move it over here, you'll see that it still looks like it's sitting on the floor. If I move it over here, it's still sitting on the floor. Okay? If I were to grab the arrow, I would have to go this way and then go that way to get it over there. If I grab one of the red boxes, you'll see that it lifts off the floor, but it's not moving in that other direction. Okay? So just get used to using that a little bit because it is a little bit tricky to play with. Okay, so take a couple seconds, move around your scene. Use the Alt, left, middle, and right, and then use the Move tool, arrows, and other stuff to get that lined up. The wheel, and click in and out. Okay, but what happens with this, and I'm going to get really close to this. So let's say I need to get really close to that point right here. Okay, right there, I need to get close to that point. If I use my clicking zoom, see how it jumps me into that spot? Okay, so it's always best to use Alt and then use your right mouse button to zoom into it because it's a much smoother transition. Okay. All right, so W was our Move tool. Yes, sir. Okay, so the Move tool was W, right? That was the Move tool. Now the next one is Rotate. What's Rotate's hotkey? E. Not R. That's correct. That's like the one thing that's always bothered me with mine. Just make it R. So now we can rotate. Now you'll notice with this one, we have still the red, green, and blue, but now we also have yellow. I mean, well, we had yellow before, but we have an outer circle, okay? We never use the outer circle to rotate our object, okay? You see that? Let me make this a little bigger. So you see the red, green, blue, and then you see this outer circle. We never want to use this outside circle to rotate because it spins it in a funky direction, okay? So watch my rotates over here in the channel box as I spin in this funky direction. Look at them go crazy, okay? So if I tried to animate this, it would go bananas, and we don't want that. Or if I tried to rotate it perfect, it would go bananas. So always rely on just rotating it on just one axis at a time. All right, so now we have Move, which is W, E, which is Rotate, and then Scale, which is R, right, okay? Now look on the keyboard where those are at. Right next to each other, okay? W, E, R. They're very clever in how they did this. If you're a right-handed person, it's very easy to just kind of keep that left hand right on the left side of your keyboard, and most of your hotkeys are right there, okay? So typically when I work, my left hand is right on that left side, and then my right hand is on the mouse, okay? So if you hit R, that will take you to Scale, and you'll see the Scale manipulator is red, green, blue again, and this time we have boxes instead of arrows, okay? This will be a common thread throughout what we're doing, where we have boxes for scale, move is arrows, and then rotation is circular stuff. Okay? So again, we can play with these settings to see what they're going to do. All right, so now we have W, E, and R, which is the move, rotate, and scale. You'll see there's another one that says select on your list, which is Q. Any of these tools can select anything, okay? So the move tool, I can select stuff. The rotate tool, I can select stuff. Here's where the issue comes in. Okay, so I have two objects right here, and I'm in the rotate tool. Now I'm trying to select this other object. See how it's not letting me select that other object? Because this other object is kind of in this circular area of my rotate tool, it doesn't let me select it. So sometimes we just switch to our other tool, then we switch back to that, and then we would go back to whatever tool we were in. Okay? Or if I'm zoomed in, this is not inside it, then I can click it and then still manipulate it. Okay? But when I'm zoomed out like that, it becomes just a bit trickier. And sometimes I'll just deselect and then reselect. Okay? All right. So now let's go over to the, oops, let's delete that object. Just delete the object you had. Let's make a new one. Under Create Polygon again, pick another one. You can pick the same one if you want. Okay, so now we have another object inside of our scene. On the far right in the channel box, I want you to scroll down. Okay, when we scroll down in the channel box, you'll see this little thing that says shapes. And for me, it says P-pipe shape 1. And then it says inputs. Okay, and then for me, it says polypipe. And if I clicked on it, it wasn't there. I would have more information here. Okay. This information is what went into creating this pipe the way that it looks. So how big is the radius? How high is it? What's the thickness? How many subdivisions are we looking at? What's the subdivisions in the height, and what's the caps and some other stuff? Okay? So any one of these can be changed. I can take the radius and make it 5. And now the radius for this is 5 units. I can make the height 6. And you can see how I can make more divisions happening in that direction. Okay? I can take the thickness and make that thicker. I can take the subdivisions and turn those down or turn them up. Okay? And you'll see how we can start to play with this to get different shapes out of that original object. So what we can do is use a virtual slider. I'm sure you guys are familiar with sliders. If you ever used a program and it had a little sliding bar that went across, okay? Inside Maya, they have virtual ones, which is weird because we're already in a computer, so it's already virtual, but it's like a double virtual one. So if we click on any word inside Maya, so if I click on the word height, for instance, and then I use my middle mouse button inside of my view, okay, so I click on the word height, go into my view, use the middle mouse button, you can see how I can interactively adjust this. Okay, and that's for anything inside here. All right, so this is, like I said, an interactive thing. Now, the areas that it doesn't work to is when we have a word. So if you look at where it says create UVs for mine, it says on. It won't let me scrub that. I can't just like scrub and then have it change. It won't do that. Okay, so those words you can't do, but everything else you can do. And like I said, it's pretty interactive and easy to start to play with this if you get comfortable doing it. Now my advice to you is, as a beginner, that you have to go into the software and you have to just play with it. Okay, so like I said last time, if you don't have it at home already, download it, install it, see if it works. If it works, great. If not, try to get into lab and just play with it. Okay, or get here before class and start to play with it, because it'll just make your life a lot easier. My goal is to make this as easy as I can for you, but I can only do so much, okay? I can lead a horse to water, I can't make them drink. So that's what we want to do, is drink water. Down here on the bottom, so that's our channel box on the right, okay? Down in the bottom is our layers. So you'll see that it says display, render, and anim, okay? So the display layers are probably something you're familiar with from Illustrator or After Effects or Photoshop. Those are basically just visibilities, okay? So if I had several objects, and you don't have to do this part, I'm just going to show it to you. I have several objects. I can add each object to their own individual layer.
Is duplicate still Command D?
Yes, Control D. Okay, so each object is on its own layer. You'll see that it does not affect where they are visibly, okay? If something's on my top layer, doesn't mean it's in front. It's just for visibility purposes, I can turn that specific object off or on. Okay? So I'm just turning their visibility on or off. We'll get more into this. It's not really important at this point that we do it. Now, looking at a scene like Avatar, where you're working with huge digital sets, where they had all these plants, and then they had creatures, then they had the Avatar people, and then they had, you know, all this other stuff going on. Opening that into Maya would just like take forever. So they typically ran stuff with the visibilities turned off for everything except for their key stuff that they needed to focus on. Okay, so just be aware that, you know, it's a useful tool to be doing that kind of thing. All right, so that's our stuff down there. All right, so now we're going to go down to, there's a little running man. You can delete your stuff if you want. There's a little running man on the bottom right. We're going to click on the running man. These are our preferences. So these are all of the different little preferences inside Maya as far as settings go that we may want to adjust. We're going to start at the top and work our way down. So going to Interface first, and then we'll work our way down. So I said for, in this one, the couple will point out, highlight what's new. Remember that box that popped up when we opened up Maya? There's where we can turn it off if we wanted to, or turn it back on. Doesn't matter. You could even change the color, though, if you are so inclined to change the color. The other one is the mouse scroll wheel. Remember I said we could zoom in and out using that scroll wheel like clicking? Typically I make people disable it, but usually it causes confusion. But if you feel you need to disable it so you don't use it, you can just do it there. It doesn't hurt you to keep it on. UI elements, these are just random UI elements that are in there. The view cube, if you're working at home, you may see off to the right in this corner, you may see a floating cube, okay? I'll show you what it looks like that, okay? This is the view cube. I personally don't use it. Some people like using it. And here you won't see it on. Typically it's off because it's hidden. Even though it says show, it's off in other areas. There's help. This was just some random stuff. Okay, so all of these are just different menu items that we may want to adjust at some point. I just want you to see them. We're going to jump down to where it says settings, and I'm going to point a couple things out in here. In settings, you'll see that over here where it says linear, it says centimeter. Okay, so what that means is we're working in centimeters. So when we go to something like this, where I'm printing an angry bird, I need to know how big that's going to be, right? I can't just make it whatever size and then have it print, and I would only get like an eyeball or something because I printed it too big. So in here, it's centimeters. So I know that if I'm building something that's 7 inches by 7 inches by 7 inches, I need to convert that to centimeters. So I would go to my calculator, and I would take 7 times 2.54, and I would get 17. So roughly 17 3/4 centimeters inside Maya is as big as this thing can print. Okay? Now I can change this to inches or meters or feet or yards, but it typically doesn't result in good things happening. So we just leave it at centimeters and just work around it. There's also degrees and radians. We leave everything in degrees. And then this is the other one, which is time. So for this class, we're going to leave everything at 24 frames per second. Okay? When we render our stuff out, we'll render out, like, if we're rendering a movie, we'll render out 120 frames, and that gives us 5 seconds of footage. Okay? If we did this at 30 frames a second, how many seconds would that be for 120 frames? 4. Right, we get 4 seconds. So we get an extra second by doing it at 24. Now, again, This has nothing to do with what's going to be coming out, because once it's already out, we just get files. Whether we read them at 50 frames a second or 2 frames a second is up to us. But for everything we do in Maya, it's that. In the up axis, in Maya, it's the Y direction. So when we're looking at our grid plane, X goes one way, Z goes the other way, and then our up is Y. If you go to some programs, it's Z. And I don't know why they chose that, but some programs is Z. So if you're working between them, like if we're working in Unigraphics, they export a car out and they give it to you. Your car comes in upside down, like on the tip of it instead of flat. So you just have to be aware of that. That's why it's doing that. Let's see what else. Animation assets, cameras. Everything else is pretty standard. Let's go to files and projects here. On files and projects, we have a couple things that I'm going to point out. Number one is this autosave. So it's already happened, which is, I think we made it further than we did last year, that Maya's crashed. Okay? We've already been in the software for less than 2 hours, and it's already crashed. So it's always good to have like autosave on if you're worried about losing what you've done. I personally don't care. If I lose what I've done, it's typically, number one, going to take me less time to redo it. And number two, when I redo it, it's going to be better. Okay? Because I've already gone through the process once, and now I can refine it and make it a little bit better. So I personally don't leave autosave on, but you definitely should if you're worried about doing that. Now again, it takes literally no space for that to happen. So if you're worried about it, turn autosave on. Also, we have the autosave destination. We'll just leave that as is. And then we have the interval, which is how many minutes. How often do you want it to autosave your file? Right now, the default's 10. How long do you want it to save between things, right? So whatever you want to set that to is up to you. All right, so we'll leave that as is. Time slider, that'll be the next one we go to. In the time slider, we have a couple things we want to set. So number one is playback speed. We want to play back at real time 24 frames per second. Sorry, nope. We want playback speed to be play every frame. Sorry. And then the maximum playback speed to be real time 24 frames a second. Okay? So what that means is that it's going to play back as fast as it can, but it's going to show us every single frame. Okay? If we had this set to just 24, what it would do is it would go to frame 1, and then it would jump to wherever it should be for that second. So every second it's going to make sure that it shows where it should be in time. What happens is you get skipping this way, the other way. Okay, this way we don't. So this way is the good way. We can also do key tick size, and you can adjust lots of stuff inside here too. All right. Undos is going to be the next one. So the default amount of undos inside of Maya is 50. So what that means is that you can hit the undo button 50 times, and then it'll no more undos. For me, that's fine. I typically don't go past 50 undos. You can set it to infinite, and that means that you will have an infinite amount of undos. What that also means is that every time you do something, Maya's saving that thing that you've done somewhere so that it can be undone. Okay? So if you click on an object, then you click off, there's 2 undos. Okay? So you may not want to have an infinite amount of undos. Yes, sir?
Does that chew up your RAM?
It'll eat up your RAM. It'll eat up your hard drive space a little bit. I mean, the biggest thing is that it's just going to like slow your system down because it's using up all that stuff. Typically for an intro student, I say 200 is a good amount. Okay? So you can set your queue size to 200, and you'll have 200 undos that you can do. All right? Definitely don't turn it off. I don't know why someone would, but you could turn your undo queue off if you're living dangerously. It's a challenge, right? And that's all that we're going to do in there. Okay, so we're going to hit save. All right, a couple more things, and then I'm going to let you guys out of here. Under File, we're going to go down to File, and then we're going to go to Project Window. Okay? The project window is where we're going to create our project folder. Remember we talked about on this thing how we want to keep everything organized? so that Maya knows where things are coming in and where things are going out. We want to make sure that it still stays organized throughout it. And this area is where that's going to happen, okay? So we're going to click on New. And for the current project, it'll allow us to type it in. You have to hit New first, obviously, and then you can type in your last name _ playing. Okay? Now, where it's going to save it is the next area. Right now, mine is set to the C drive because that's where I save all my stuff to. You're going to hit the folder, and you're going to go find your P drive. And remember that work folder we created? Find that work folder. It should be on your P drive in your name. Once you're inside your work folder, just hit select. Okay, so the last word, I don't know what it's doing. The last word inside of this location should be work. Okay, the rest of this, where it says scenes, assets, images, source images, render data, and so on, this is where Maya is automatically going to start sorting things. Okay, so as we start bringing stuff into Maya, so let's say we're modeling a glue stick, this image of this texture that's out here is something we would probably create in what program? Photoshop or InDesign or Illustrator or whatever. Okay, we wouldn't create it in Mari, we would paint it in Mari. So if we wanted to take this and we wanted to bring it into Photoshop, this source images folder is where we would bring that in. Okay, so when we go into Maya and we say, hey, here's the picture for that label, Maya jumps into the source images folder because it knows that's where it should be reading it from. Okay, when we save our work, it saves it into the scenes folder automatically. When we render stuff out and we're taking it into Photoshop or After Effects, it automatically puts it in the images folder. Okay, if we don't have any of this stuff set up, it's just like blah, just like everything's everywhere and it's not organized and you have no idea where your stuff is. Okay, we want to stay organized. So let's hit accept on the bottom. And we're just going to go to File and then save our scene. And then type in whatever. I'm typing my last name, playing _ 001. You don't have to set it after this. We made it, so it's already set. Yes, sir. Save scene will just overwrite. We don't already have one, so there's no, it'll do the same thing at this point. Once we have a scene, it's always best to save it occasionally or often, and then save as maybe once a day or once every hour. I have people that will save things once an hour or save as once an hour, and you look at their file, it's saving, it's thinking. This warning comes up, you have a student version, you can't make money off it. Yep, got it. They'll save their scene as, let's see, it's 406 on 826. So it'll be 08/26/2015 _ 406. Okay, so I've just saved it as the date and the time. In 1 hour, I'll go back and update it again. And then every day I know which version I'm at and which time I'm at.
Yeah.
That seems crazy to me, but some people like that, okay? You are going to be your own worker. You're responsible for what you have. If you are the kind of person that likes to live dangerously, save it one time on one floppy disk that you let your cat play with, and then we'll see who gets stuff turned in, okay? You want to save your stuff as, you want to put it in the right folders, you want to organize it nice and neat and keep it safe and make sure that everything is cool. All right, so now we're going to exit Maya. So go to File and say Exit. And we'll wait for Maya to close down. Dun, dun, dun. All right. So then we're going to go to the documents. So go to the P drive, or go to Computer and go to P drive. And on P drive, you should see a Maya folder. Correct? You see a Maya folder? All right, so there's no Maya folder, but there's a 2016 folder. That 2016 folder is your preferences, okay? So what we want to do is we want to save those preferences to a spot that we can use them next class. When we come in on Monday, we want to use those preferences so that all of our hotkeys, if we were to have set them up, were there. Our shelf that we did set up is there, set up and ready to go. Our project settings are all there, and all the other stuff that we've set up is already there. So we're going to right click on that folder and we're going to cut it. So right click and go to cut. Then inside of your folder on the P drive, in the 2510, you're just going to paste that folder that you've cut. Okay, so we've cut that 2016 folder from the P drive. We've gone into our folder and pasted it. So now all of our stuff is together. Okay, now just to show you, if I go into my work folder, here's that playing folder that we just created. We went to File, Project window, and we'll do this more as we go. We created this project folder, and then Maya created all of this for us. Okay, so that as we start to bring images in, we put them in source images. As we render stuff out, it's going in images. As we save our scene, there's our scenes. Okay, so Maya's already starting the organizational process for us. It's just up to us to make sure we keep it up. Okay, and when we come in Monday, we'll play with this a bit more. All right, so now before you leave, I recommend that you take your 2015 folder and you upload it to Dropbox, or you put it on your thumb drive, or you email it to yourself, or whatever you need to do so you don't lose that folder. Okay, if you lose it, all your stuff from today is gone and you just redo it. All right, Monday we're going to continue working on stuff. Over the weekend, if you're not going to be 100%, but if you're not like 85, 80% sure of what we did, or you really want to practice it, this lecture is going to be up on Canvas. Okay, so you can log into Canvas, you'll see the class, and this lecture that we're doing right now will be up there, so you can watch it again and redo some of these steps. Okay, any questions?